Jamie, let's start with the Olympics recently finished. I'm going to start with the gender row that sort of took over the Olympic boxing. Aman Khalif and Lin Yuting both went on to win gold medals. This is the problem with social media. One thing gets said, bit of misinformation, false information, and it spiraled, went out of control. And these women were labeled men. Turns out it's not, it's just their testosterone levels, etc. What did you make of the whole situation and how it was handled?
Well, in all honesty, everyone jumps on the bandwagon talking about it's really a man fighting in a women's category. It turned out not exactly that way to be the case, but the world during the World Championships last year, apparently she was banned from competing, or people with that condition are banned from competing in that category because it's unfair. Now, if that's the case, and I'm only going off what I've read, so it's hard to sort of distinguish sometimes between what's true and what's not. But if that's the case, that they've not been allowed to compete in certain competitions because of that condition, which is understandable, because it's basically the same, from what I can gather, as having the advantages of being, or having certain aspects of being a man, and competing against women. There's, from what I can make out, using common sense, there's not that much difference between having that type of chromosome and developing or producing more testosterone, which then increases muscle strength and muscle mass and stuff like that. So is it an unfair advantage? Yes. And is it not fair on the other girls? Yes. That's the way I look at it. And, I'm not saying that it's unfair on the individual who's got that condition, but you can't put one person's needs over the vast majority of other people who are competing from a level playing field. That's the way I look at it. So, of course, I feel empathy for that person who's been born into the world in a certain way, and it's not her fault. But she shouldn't be given advantage over other people just for the sake of being fair and saying, she was born as a woman, but she's got an unfair advantage. For me, it's that's not the way it should be. It should be. I understand. I feel empathy for you, but you can't compete in this because you've got an unfair advantage against somebody.
It's one of those situations, it works both ways, because if these fighters were not allowed to compete, they would just turn around and say, well, hang on a minute, I'm being unfairly treated, not being able to compete due to something that's completely out of my hands, etc. And then you have the other side of it, those who will say it's unfair, she's a woman, it's, not equal rights, etc.
And that's my point. My point is, so how many people would compete? 32 competitors, is it, or more? 64, 32, I think, in each weight category. If there's one person who's got an unfair advantage, then 31 people could then, quite within the rights, turn around and say, I'm being unfairly treated. So is it right to put 31 people in that position or one person? That's and for me, that's just common sense.
What's the fix? Could every fighter be tested for certain levels of testosterone? If you breach the threshold, you can't compete, or
Yeah. Well, I'm assuming that that's how it came about. Surely there was some type of blood test, or testosterone levels were raised, and then the explanation was, well, this is a genetic or a chromosome disorder in a woman, which the reason why they've got raised levels is because of that. If that's the case, then okay, that's a fair explanation, but it's not fair for everybody else who's competing in that category, because everyone else comes from a level playing field. don't forget as well, we nobody's got genetically the same makeup. Everybody's got different genetic makeups. But that's how life is. That's human beings. But to have a certain type of chromosome which makes you produce stuff more like a man than you would a woman, then that gives you an unfair advantage, which is not fair. And we're talking about, you have to in stuff like that. In my book, you have to go with the vast majority. You can't side with the small minority of people. You know, we've had this debate loads of times. I've had so many little, not arguments, but debates with people about the debate on, you know, can a man who now decides to say I'm a woman go into a female toilet? Now, to make him feel, I'm going to say him so that you understand who I'm talking about. The guy who's now saying I'm a woman is going into a female toilet. To make him feel comfortable, he's allowed to go in there, but every other person in that toilet feels uncomfortable, I would assume. So how does that make sense? To make one person feel comfortable, everybody else has to feel uncomfortable. Absolute insane in my book. You know, the vast majority has to override the small minority. And I feel for people, and I have no issue at all if that's how you want to live your life. Everybody's entitled to live the life exactly the way they want to do. But don't make other people, or don't force other people to have to put up with that, because that's your decision. That's wrong.
We mentioned about the testing, and we assume that's how it came about. And she wasn't allowed to compete at a previous tournament because of the testing. But from what I read as well, I believe she competed at the last Olympics. Now she didn't win gold at that Olympics. Everyone's assumed that she's gone and won gold now purely because of the unfair advantage that she has clearly got. However, she has competed at the last games and didn't win the gold medal. So you could turn around and say, well, actually, it is a fair playing field because she may not be the best boxer in the world.
Yeah. Listen, there's loads of arguments. So she has lost fights before, and that means that she's obviously not unbeatable. Who she's lost to, I've not seen a record. I've not really looked into it that much. But I'm just so I'm talking about this really vaguely. I don't know any details about it, but you know, I've seen some men box who are terrible, and I've seen some female boxers who are unbelievable. I've watched female boxers spar with male boxers, professional, and absolutely dominate them. So it's not just a sex thing, whether you're male or female. Doesn't give you, and in fact, we're not even talking in that context. We're talking about somebody who's got a chromosome deficiency, which means that they've got some traits which are male. So it's not even the same type of thing. But if you've got an advantage in any way, shape, or form at the highest level, it can make the difference between winning or losing. She's obviously improved as a boxer since the days when she'd lost those fights. As time goes on and you gain more experience, you become a better fighter. She's obviously became a better fighter, but it doesn't mean it's fair. And you know, you've got to think of the vast majority of people. That's my opinion. My opinion is you can't take one person's situation and override everybody else's in that category because you feel sorry for them or you've got empathy for them. I have empathy for everyone, but I don't think it should put them in a higher position to everybody else because you feel sorry for someone.
No, so I say common sense should prevail at the end of the day.
Yeah,
Let's move on from that. Still with the Olympics, obviously the Olympics, especially in boxing, it can catapult and give fighters a platform for when they do turn professional. There's talk of no boxing at the next Olympics in 2028. Just how much would that, or what would that do to amateur boxing? Would that see a lot of fighters turn pro a little bit earlier because they're now losing almost their pinnacle and the top of their mountain as an amateur, how would it change this whole landscape of amateur boxing in your opinion?
Yeah, well, I mean, how many superstars we've seen come through the Olympics and then turn professional and then become world champions. It's sort of it's the number one pathway into the pros. You know, the ideal situation for every fighter, I imagine, would be, progress, box for your country, qualify for the Olympics, win gold, and then turn professional. That's the sort of how it's always gone. It's not the be all and end all, but it'd be such a sad day if we get to the next Olympics and we're not representing boxing there, because it's, by the look of it, it's because of inadequacy. You know, the scoring's been horrendous for a long time now. We've seen it going back years and years, and nothing's ever been done about it. So understandably, they probably got to the point where they're going, we can't keep putting up with this. There's too much controversy around this type of stuff, and we need it to be, the Olympics is the ultimate tournament. It should all be grace and glory and everything what comes with it. You don't want controversy. So if there's one or two sports where it's consistently bringing controversy, I'd imagine they're all sat around a table going, it's happened again in the boxing. There's another horrendous decision. It was quite clear to see that person won that fight and they haven't got the decision. We can't keep we can't keep allowing this to go on. So I'm hoping that in the time from when this Olympics has just finished and the next one starts, an organisation comes forward, a new governing body. They put forward a plan to the IOC where they go, we promise you we'll make this right. You can't take boxing away from the Olympics. I know we're biased, but for me, it's one of the main, aside from the track stuff, it's one of the main events in the Olympics. So I'm hoping they come to some sort of agreement with somebody who's got a plan, a view where they can go, right, we agree it hasn't been run rightly, but let's do it right this time.
Talk to me about Pat Brown. He's turning professional after these Olympic Games. Somebody you've seen a little bit of in the gym. I know he trains with Nigel Travis.
Yeah.
How much of Pat do you know? How much of him have you seen, and how exciting can he be in the program?
Yeah, he's been down to the gym quite often with all the pros. I love the kid, real down to earth lad. Can really fight. He'll be made for the pros, and I thought he was very unlucky in the Olympics, and that's how it goes. Sometimes those type of decisions early on doesn't mean that it alters anything in terms of the way he's going to progress moving forward in the pro ranks. And I think everyone could see that he's stylistically he's much more suited to the pros, and you've got someone who can really fight, who's articulate, he can really talk. He's not a bad looking bloke, and he'll be able to sell himself. So I think he's going to do really well in the pros, and I think, in all honesty, he shouldn't hang around. He's one of those fighters where he could turn pro straight away into 6-rounders, straight, after a couple of fights, straight into 8-rounders, and it wouldn't be long before he'd be boxing for titles, because he's got the type of style and the temperament for it.
Talk to me from experience about being a fighter, coming through with a sport in Manchester. I know he mentioned in an interview he wants to be the next big name at Manchester. He wants, the Ricky Hatton days back. You've done that. Anthony Crowder's done that. It's a city that really gets behind their fighters. How or what will he experience come out, his pro debut on his first ring walk and, like you mentioned, first title fight? What will he go?
Mate, Manchester fans, there's no one like it in the country. They're unbelievable, and he's right. There's been a bit of a gap in between now. Obviously Ricky was that guy, and then Crawler not to the absolute extent of Ricky, but certainly, a massively popular fighter, really exciting style, and that's what they want. They want that type of, if you want, Manchester type of style where it's aggression. Pat's really got that style. He can actually box really well as well on the back foot. He's got that in his locker, but he can really fight. He's strong, good body puncher, which is one of the old Manchester traits. And honestly, I can see within 3 years in being a world champion. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if within 2 years, as long as he's not rushed, as long as they navigate it properly, and he's matched with the right guys. But he's definitely got the style and the temperament to go right to the top in the pros and be a world champion in the not too distant future.
You mentioned world champions. Let's move on to some of the champions and the top level fighters. In recent news, Crawford, he's vacated his welterweight title, so it looks like he's staying at 154. He's mandatory for Fundora. There's talks of Virgil Ortiz Jr. fight. What fight do you want to see next for Crawford?
Do you know what? Everyone who was asking me about the Madrimov fight, I said it's a risky fight for him, and I wouldn't be surprised if Madrimov beat him. And it was really close. I thought Crawford just nicked it, but it was a hell of a fight, and it shows you why we've got weight divisions. There comes to a point where a fighter can't just rely on his skill. Size comes into it. I always thought the Canelo fight was a step too far, and he should never have sort of ventured there. I think 154 is his absolute ceiling. I don't think he should go any further than that, because he's at risk then of losing to a lesser fighter who's just bigger and stronger than him. So yeah, I think Ortiz is a great fight. I think I think he wins that fight. I think it's an exciting fight. And it's a good fight to watch. But as Crawford has gone through the weights, he's not been as elusive, because people's dimensions, as you go through the weights, people are bigger, stronger, longer, rangier, and he's had to adapt his style. So he's getting to that stage now. I think welterweight's probably his optimum fighting weight. I think Boots is the wrong fight for him. I really do, especially at this stage of his career. I'm not saying he couldn't have beat him, but at some point everyone starts to slide, and they reach that mountain peak, and I think Crawford's probably got to his best, and he's seen his better days, and he's probably not. He's nowhere near finished, but he's a slightly on the decline. And Boots is, Boots isn't as evasive as I'd like him to be either. He does get it himself, but he can really punch, and he's tenacious, and I think Crawford should avoid that fight, because I feel like Boots wins that fight.
You mentioned about going down to 140, so back to welterweight. How difficult would it be for Crawford to come back down in weight? He's gone up and he's going to campaign there for potentially up to a year. And then if he does drop it down again, he's getting older. Is it going to be difficult for him to drop the weight again?
Well, you'd have to wait and see what it's like in a year's time. If he went back down there now, he'd have no issues, because he's not sort of allowed his body to fill out and grow. That's the problems start to come around then, when you put on natural muscle mass, and you've got to cannibalize your body so that you get rid of the muscle. So he's not at that stage yet, but in a year's time, then maybe he would be. So we'd have to wait and see. But the older you get, the harder it gets to come down in weight. So I'd never advise anyone sort of past the age of 30. If you go up a weight and then stay there for a year or more, and then try to come back down, it's never a good move.
Last one from me. Chris Eubank Jr. still calling out for the Canelo fight. Will we ever see it, do you think?
In all honesty, I don't think we will. I wouldn't mind seeing it, because I think Eubank's game, and he'll come and give it his all. So I think it'd be a good fight to watch. But does he deserve that type of fight? He's obviously wants it. It's a huge payday for anyone. So of course he wants to test himself against the best, and I know he'd go and give his absolute all. But Canelo is a phenomenal fighter, certainly at super middleweight, and I just feel like he's got too many strings to his bow in all areas for Eubank. Not knocking Eubank's talent and his skill set himself. He's a great fighter, but Canelo's just a different level for me.
Jamie, that's perfect. Thank you very much for your time. Always appreciate it.
No worries, pal.